channel which is focusing on auteur cinema. And when it comes to auteurs, probably the most controversial case, perhaps of all time, is George Lucas because he insists he's an auteur. He seems to meet the formal definition of an auteur, seems to have a consistent style, so on and so forth, but the success of Star Wars and how massive it is and influential has made it kind of problematic using the auteur label or auteur analysis. So, despite a few interesting examples, most people don't take him seriously as an auteur. And we can only get started in terms of looking at him that way. And I myself am skeptical of just saying, well, he's an auteur, we should just accept the style as it is and not issue some valid criticisms. So here we're going to respond to Hello Greedo, a very popular YouTuber, and his issues with Revenge of the Sith. Now, I personally don't think Revenge of the Sith is the strongest of the prequels. I think it actually is perhaps the weakest, but I will play devil's advocate and try to present the maximal case for Revenge of the Sith. And we'll be discussing the prequels from a kind of auteur lens and try to see the good and bad in them.
Enemies throughout the prequel trilogy always felt dumb to me. They never created tension. They seemed to be there just to rack up some easy kills, show some spectacle, and give an excuse for more lightsaber swinging. Droid armies. I mean, it's a cool idea, but they just needed to be tougher, less comical. You need bad guys that feel menacing, that feel ferocious. The only bad guy that felt real and merciless throughout the entire movie was Palpatine. He was great. General Grievous was a dupe. His character is a joke.
Well, I actually agree only halfway. I do think Dooku is kind of overrated as a character. I disagree on Grievous. I actually think he's a pretty good character. But his main point that it's all style, no substance. No, there is substance, but I think the problem with this review and his perspective is he's reading it all very literal. Like these are real people or these are real things. And Lucas has always insisted this is a very symbolic, mythical trilogy, and you have to see it from that perspective, and then a lot of things become clear. So I didn't have much of an issue with Grievous or Dooku on the whole. I would agree, though, that one major failure is when they have to be killed off. We have to basically throw them off stage. It's done very clumsily, and it's just very rushed. So Grievous was built up as a very formidable opponent, but then when he dies at the hand of Obi-Wan, he just goes down very easily. So Dooku is presented as a very powerful dark Jedi who taps into some dark side powers, and he easily gets rid of Obi-Wan, but then just loses to Anakin in a couple seconds. So you're like, okay, characters are fine. They're well built up. Symbolically, they're kind of mirroring like the vampire and the Dracula trope. And if you know Christopher Lee, he played Dracula in a lot of other films. So symbolically, I get the basic message. We're sort of alluding to Vader through the various aspects of these other characters. But in terms of the plot, it's not clear what these characters are doing. It's not clear what their motive is, what their function is. And their deaths seem to have zero impact. You'd think this would be like shocking news. First, Dooku is gone, and then Grievous is gone, but didn't seem to have any impact on the plot or even the events. So you're like, I get where he's coming from. It just seems like a lot of flashy stuff to keep the plot going. But I think there is substance there, but you have to look at the symbols much more carefully. But then he gets into more, I think, legitimate grounds, and I think this is the heart of the issue too, as to what it is people liked and hated about Revenge of the Sith.
Pretty grounded too. I mean, minus the barrel roll torpedo move that he does, and the fact that he so easily cuts down 3 Jedi, but once it's just Mace Windu and the Emperor, hey, it's actually pretty good. Like I said before, the sinister nature of Palpatine really makes this movie. And when Anakin comes into the room, Palpatine ramps up the manipulation. It's one of the scenes in the movie that has the most tension. Anakin is regretful. But, as an audience member, you could easily side with Anakin. He says killing Palpatine isn't the Jedi way. He said that Palpatine needs to stand trial. And he's got a point. Mace Windu is kind of going off the Jedi script. Anakin sees Palpatine as a friend and he's torn. Is Anakin naive? Yeah. Is he oblivious to his surroundings and does he come off as easily manipulated? Yeah, totally. But his turn to the dark side is actually pretty fun to watch. Did it feel quick and rushed? Yeah, absolutely. Did it feel too easy? Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I agree that Palpatine probably is the reason the prequels have a lot of staying power because he is fairly consistent, he's fairly compelling. So his plans and motivations, however crazy they are, do follow a certain coherence, and that's what people can latch onto, and the performance is very compelling. But again, we're left with other puzzles because we're not just explaining how Anakin fell to the dark side, we're explaining how the Jedi fell. And again, it is like a lot of things in Revenge of the Sith. Miracles just happen that basically allow Sidious to win, and we can lament the passing of the Republic, the rise of the Empire, and how we have the events flow into the original trilogy. The whole point of the prequels was that they would answer a lot of questions, but we're still left with a lot of questions. So, at least one of the major purposes or major motivations to see these films isn't really there because we could have guessed somehow, yeah, Anakin was seduced to the dark side. Seeing it explicitly still leaves us with a lot of questions. However, I'm pretty satisfied with the prequels on the whole. I don't think they're as strong as the sequel's original trilogy because, again, the visual look and the plot and storytelling aren't synchronizing as well as they should because, again, a lot of things are being forced in to get us to a certain place. And it just seemed much more organic, even with the sequels as well as the original trilogy, because, again, maybe it was a little basic, but we know why Rey needs to kill Palpatine, right? She cares for her friends. She's not seduced by the dark side. So she's willing to fight for the side of the good against Palpatine. Same thing with Luke. It's a little simplistic. He's a farm boy. He's totally innocent. His father offers the dark side, but he's like, no, I don't see anything good in that. I'm going to risk my life to save you, etc., etc. The central stories may be a little simplistic, but they do make a lot of sense. On the other hand, with Vader and Anakin, we just have a lot of gaps in terms of, well, why did you do this? And the central thing behind it is he's offering immortality and to save Padme, but you're like, okay, but how does that generate super Hitler? I get it. The reason is he's his fear of loss, but a lot of people fear losses. They don't become super Hitler. So at least the psychological makeup of Vader still remains pretty obscure, and ironically, it's Disney that has to fill in the gaps with Kenobi and other things, explaining how we got from Anakin to Vader. So he is right that there's still a lot of issues with Revenge of the Sith, but when we take the wider view that these are kind of mythical documentaries of this universe, then I think we can be more forgiving about where they failed and succeeded, at least from my perspective.